Hey everybody, what's going on? It's your man Corey. Welcome to the Digital Dash, where I'll be giving you guys tips on how to market your songs and get those numbers booming. Now, if you're new to the channel, I'm a digital marketer. I specialize in helping artists like yourself get their songs heard through platforms like Spotify, like Instagram, like YouTube, and a bunch of others. Now, what I want to talk with you guys about today is, in a nutshell, why you should start a podcast. Now, podcasts have been seeing a major resurgence within the past couple of years, and I personally think that they can be a great tool for you guys to add to your content strategy and a great way for you to connect with your fans and to start building and developing your brand further than what you could do with some of your shorter form content. But before we get into all of that, come follow me on Instagram. I make sure to put my ad name on the screen. Come talk to me, come engage with me, come give me some video ideas, all of that good stuff. Now, with that being said, let's get right into it. Now, the inspiration from this video came from two things. The first thing being a conversation that I had with my friend. Actually, the guy that shoots these videos. Coincidence, right? In that conversation, we were just kind of talking, shooting the shits, and I asked him, who is your favorite artist right now? To which he told me, J. Cole and Travis Scott. And I asked him, if J. Cole had a podcast or if Travis Scott had a podcast, would you listen to them? And that kind of turned into this whole 10-minute conversation about pretty much which artists do we think would have the personality to make a podcast survive. But it kind of led me to a different path, of which I started thinking, why don't more artists make podcasts? Why aren't artists out here making podcasts and adding it to their content schedule? Now, the second thing that inspired this video was Spotify. Spotify recently announced its partnership with this app called Anchor, which, for those of you who don't know, Anchor is pretty much an app that you download on your phone and you can create and distribute a podcast directly from it. I'm talking about, you can literally set up the app, put your phone to your ear, start talking, trim it down, and have it posted on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify by the end of however long it takes. And Spotify is pretty much doing this because they are starting to go on what they like to call an audio first push, meaning that they're starting to gear the platform more towards their podcast because that's what's been bringing them the big bucks within the past year or so since the podcast resurgence pretty much happened. And what they're trying to do, if you've looked at your Spotify for Artists dashboard, I think this happened maybe about 2-3 weeks ago when they started pushing this message out. But if you saw the message on your dashboard, they're pretty much trying to encourage artists to create more podcasts, to add to their audio library so they can continue to push out and promote more podcasts, which once again led me to the question of why don't more artists create podcasts? And pretty much what I'm here today to do is to try to convince some of you guys that a podcast could actually be a great addition to your long form content schedule. And once again, it can be a great way for you to connect with and build with your fans. So let's get into that. So let's get into the why. Why should you, the busy artist who's already trying to figure out their other 100 content methods, start focusing on a podcast? Well, outside of the fact of one, audio dominates. We're at a point where because of things like Amazon and Spotify and really even Apple and the other streaming platforms that are starting to focus on podcasts, we're moving to a point where people just want to hear audio. They like listening to things. We like listening to things other than music on our long car rides or on our commutes and stuff like that. And outside of the popularity resurgence, because like I said, podcasts is something that were really popular around the mid-2000s. They kind of died out and they came back within the last 3 years and have been on fire since. Besides those two things, which are two very, very big things, here are 3 reasons why you should at least consider making a podcast. One, it increases your long form content diversity and just gives you more long form content to work with. Meaning that your music videos, your interviews, your vlogs, those don't have to be your only forms of long form content. And long form content dominates as well. People love giving you their screen time as long as it's something that is interesting to them and they're willing to watch or listen to. Secondly, it gives you another way to build your brand. Now, one of the hardest parts for artists when building their brand is trying to communicate all of the different little facets and pieces of your brand that fans need to know about or that you want them to know about. Now, with the podcast, you can literally talk to them about the things that interest you and start to build a connection with them based off of that. So just because you're an artist doesn't mean you have to have a music-based podcast, right? Let's say that you're an artist who's really into video games and movies and pop culture. You could start a podcast where you give your take on those things to your fans, and that gives you another conversation piece to talk with them about outside of, do I like your music? Do I like your videos? Am I a fan of you? That also gives you another avenue of content to build a fan base around so that you can then transfer that fan base over to your music, over to your videos, over to whatever it is that you're trying to push from an artistic standpoint. Making this podcast, giving yourself something to talk about, gives you something to add to your brand. Cool, we got those two things. And thirdly, making podcasts for artists at least is untapped waters. Like I said earlier, there aren't many artists who are out making podcasts. It's not something that I've seen a lot of independent artists do. I've heard a few mention that they're going to do it. I've even had a couple of clients who are working working on creating their own podcast, but it's still something that is new and in the works for artists in that community. So it's still uncharted waters, it's still untapped potential, it's still something for you guys to go out and make a name for yourselves in, so that once again you can start pushing this outside fan base who may have never heard of you otherwise back to you and your music and your other forms of content. And if you need proof that making podcasts work, let's look at these two examples, right? Let's look at one, Travis Scott when he made his Wave Radio, which, to be honest with you guys, I was trying to think of like a really far back example of this, and he was one of the best ones that I could think of. But back when Apple Music and Spotify were having their really big content war, when they were battling for exclusives, Apple Music started giving out radio shows to different artists and different personalities. One of them being Travis Scott, one of them being Nicki Minaj eventually. I think Chance got a show, Zane Lowe had his own thing. It was a whole bunch of things. And even though those were radio shows, they function a lot like modern day podcasts, where it was these different creators, these different artists talking about topics that were important to them, or just talking about things that they cared to let their fans know that they cared about. But the best example of an artist who is using a podcast to completely change their brand is none other than Joe Budden. If you look at Joe Budden from back in the day up into Joe Budden now, you can honestly see that he has never been more loved. His brand has never been stronger. He has never been more popular than how he has become since he started his podcast. He is a great example of artists being able to use non-musical content and to talk about non-musical things that don't surround them and completely change their brand and change their image to their fan base around it. And I believe that if a major artist can do it, or even if someone like Joe Budden, who doesn't even make music anymore, can do it, like imagine if Joe Budden made music. Imagine if Joe Budden went on to his 2 million listenership podcast and announced he had a new single out. It would go crazy. His base would eat it up. They will flock to it because they love him on that show and they will want to go support whatever it is that he's doing. So once again, I think that if he can get away with it, you can get away with it too. Even if it's on a smaller scale, it still will give you that same impact, that same wow, that same ability to connect with your base off of a different form of content. So yeah, that's pretty much my 2 cents on why you should create a podcast as an artist. If it's something that you're interested in, I've been thinking about making a video on how to create a podcast. So comment below and let me know if there's something that you're interested in. Maybe I'll just turn it into like a blog piece or like a micro video or something. I don't know, you guys let me know. And outside of that, let me know if there are any of you out there who have considered making a podcast or who are working on a podcast. Let me know what the topics are going to be about, when it's coming out. I would actually love to check something out because I'm very interested in seeing artists create podcasts as well. Now, as always, guys, if you feel like you learned anything today, please like and share this video. Hit those post notifications as well, as I wouldn't want you guys to miss anything. Once again, my name is Corey, and I'll see y'all next time.